Rush Limbaugh's heart is just fine. And to borrow the phrase about the old baseball pitcher Dizzy Dean, x-rays of Mr. Limbaugh's head showed nothing. According to Limbaugh, the current health care system is just dandy, and he did not receive any special treatment from the Queens Medical Center staff in Honolulu because they offer the best health care in the world. The latest on the bid to offer that to the people who do not make $33 million a year each in a moment, but one inevitable conclusion. What Mr. Limbaugh did not know was that he had just endorsed, wait for it, socialized medicine. TPM DC reporting that Democrats will skip the conference committee process in order to get health care reform passed. Congressional aides confirming that the House is likely to amend the Senate health care bill and send it back to the Senate for final passage. Democrats are bypassing formal negotiations in order to cut out procedural moves by Republicans attempting to delay the bill. A bitter pill to swallow, especially if you are the de facto GOP leader. Mr. Limbaugh was released from Queens Medical Center in Honolulu after an angiogram proved there is absolutely nothing wrong with his heart. Medically speaking, that is.
I've been treated to the best health care the world has to offer, and that is right here in the United States of America.
Limbaugh riding a tasty wave of irony on his vacation. Hawaii has the most progressive health care system in the country. As the New York Times reports, Hawaii requires all employers to provide generous health care benefits to any employee who works 20 hours a week or more. The state's so progressive that some measures in the current congressional reform bills would not affect Hawaii, because the state's current employer mandates go further than the federal legislation would. And it turns out the nurses at the Queens Medical Center are represented by the Hawaii Nurses Association, which is also known as a labor union, kids. In fact, the SEIU says Hawaii has the highest percentage of organized nurses in the country. So those keeping score at home, or even if you're alone. He's railed against the kind of health care Hawaii has for the rest of the country, and he's called union members thugs. But since it's the holidays and all, Mr. Limbaugh has a message about those thug nurses and their socialized medicine for the rest of us.
Based on what happened to me here, I don't think there's one thing wrong with the American healthcare system. It is working just fine, just dandy, and I got nothing special. I got no special treatment other than what anybody else that would have called 911 and had been brought in with the same kinds of symptoms.
Time now to call in Ezra Klein, staff reporter for the Washington Post and resident expert on this subject. Ezra, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
To what degree did Mr. Limbaugh just prove every philosophical point made by proponents of health care reform?
A pretty high degree. I mean, I follow this stuff closely, and there's a reason researchers don't test out other systems by having a rich, famous guy experience chest pains on the golf course. It's not how we do that. But look, I mean, the comments are both sort of selfish and wrong. We get worse outcomes on average than many other countries and pay twice as much. Meanwhile, what he is sort of right about is that if you're very wealthy, you get pretty good care in this country. And what we're trying to do in healthcare reform is give more people a taste of that. So it's sort of a twofer for Limbaugh there.
Well, before leaving his subject altogether, he is still missing that central point, which is not that people like him get special treatment, but it's that people not like him can't even afford not so special treatment.
Right, I mean, this stuff isn't in doubt, right? The Urban Institute, for one, did a study saying about 134,000 people died who didn't need to die between 2000 and 2006 because they were uninsured. And in other countries, that doesn't happen, and that wouldn't happen to Rush Limbaugh. So, I mean, there's a truly sort of, we're a bit past the holidays, but there's a real sort of Scrooge-ish element to what he said there.
Yeah, it's not required to be the holidays for him to present one of those elements. The state of reform and what we're hearing about now, the implications of this report that there will be no conference committee, what are they to you?
The implications are two things. One is that you're going to have less time for people to sort of make technical fixes back and forth, to sort of discuss things. It's conference committee is actually a good process. It's good for people to be able to sit down and think through the bill out of the sort of Klieg lights of the actual passage process. So that's a shame. Does it change what will get changed, the things people are talking about? Probably not. The sort of big ticket items that you're going to need to get people to sign on in the House, dealing with some of the public option stuff, employer mandate stuff, subsidies, those will still get moved around, and those negotiations, though informal, will probably end up pretty much the same way they would have otherwise.
We saw Senator Sanders slip in $10 billion for community health care centers in the final Senate version, essentially, as this thing was being typed up and slipped under people's doors. Is anybody expecting, especially with that time crunch that you just referenced, anybody expecting for anything to be slipped into the final version of all of this?
I would not put it past anyone. Look, they're still going to need liberals in the House to pass this bill, and by not going to conference committee, they've unsettled a lot of them. So to make sure you don't have a sort of a last-minute surprise here where you go through the amendments package and suddenly you can't pass your bill, huge problem for everybody, they're going to need to to essentially have an amendments package that brings liberals on board. So whether or not it'll be a more liberal bill than it would have been with conference committee, I think is yet to be seen, but I would expect there to be substantial or at least significant concessions to liberals in the House to make this pass smoothly.
Have you heard anything specifically, or is it just still in terms of philosophical ideas?
Very philosophical. We're real early in this yet. I mean, I think the conversation's been very informal thus far, and I don't think that, folks in the liberals in the House actually didn't know about this until today, that we were bypassing conference. So a lot of them have said they're unhappy. So my hunch is there are going to be a lot of long meetings on Capitol Hill in the next day or two to figure out exactly what that amendment package looks like.
Our tax dollars in action again. Ezra Klein of the Washington Post. Great thanks as always.
Thank you.